Welcome to Visible Man. I'm Jeff Hoffman. I'm here with Weston Karnes. Weston created Let's Get Real, Bro. It's a card game designed to get men to open up. Weston created it. Nice, we see it right there. After experiencing a period of isolation, shame, and embarrassment that led him to rethink how men relate to each other and to themselves. Weston describes it as a conversation card game to connect over your hopes, dreams, and also your shit. Think Cards Against Humanity meets your therapist, which I think is a great description. Having read some of the cards, I literally made this face of like, I don't think I want to answer that one, because they really dig deep, and because they get very real. But that's where the growth, so much growth comes from, and where connection comes from. So I'm really excited to hear the story about where this came from, Wes. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Jeff. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's like I was saying before, it's a brilliant idea because men have a hard time opening up. I think there's a unique quality about how men socialize that makes it hard. And Let's Get Real, Bro is like a nice icebreaker. It's sort of like I don't know. It's just a way to get the conversation started. So maybe you can tell us, how did you come up with this idea? Where'd this come from?
Yeah. It's been a long journey. I mean, in many ways, I try to, it's always hard to like answer this question, because in many ways it's like, it came from everything. Like it came from my life lived, like all these things merging together. And so, some of those pieces are like what you mentioned too, my own kind of growth, moving from a lot of social anxiety, a lot of isolation, to coming to a place now where I really try to invest in deeper relationships, deeper conversations, and just finding how much value there was in those in my own experience. And so, yeah, I think that was one big piece. And I think as over the last 10, 15 years, that desire for connection, and I think in many ways my own desire to like be seen, like to be able to share oneself with others, I think is a really it's a human quality. I think we all in many ways want to be acknowledged and or be seen. And I think in many ways like that, that need of my own came probably from my childhood, or but yeah, so those are a couple pieces. My design background, so I'm coming from a product design, user experience design, brand communication design background, and that was something that I started learning in the probably 7 years ago. And prior to this, I'm doing this full time, the game, but prior to this, I was designing like applications for farmers. So I was in the agriculture space, very different world, but and yeah, I mean, I have to also give credit to like the other, other conversation starters. So actually my first experience was this card game called We're Not Really Strangers, which I'd say is probably one of the larger conversation starter kind of card decks out there. And I loved it. I mean, I loved it. And I also, I feel like there's a lot of potential in that kind of idea of like, how can we use just really simple prompts to start conversations to deepen connection? Like, I think they're really onto a lot of good things. And then also my own kind of exploration in men's work. And so that's probably been something that started in the last 5 years or so, like exploring masculinity more deeply, facilitating and organizing and participating in men's groups, and seeing how much value there was in those spaces, right? Where men were saying, hey, like, sign me up. I want to join a group of people to be supported. Like, I want to share more openly and more honestly, right? I want to get real, so to speak. And taking my design background and questions like, how can I take this thing, like these men's groups, and bring them to a larger audience, right? How can I make them
Mm.
more accessible? How can I make them more palatable? I found, you know, like language, I found the language often to just be a little bit off-putting. Like I wanted something that was accessible. Like, and I think
Mm.
humor is one of the ways at which we can enter space and feel comfortable sharing more openly. Like laughter, I think, is one of the most incredible devices of healing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
all of those things kind of swelling together into like a big stew. This is really what came from that.
It's brilliant because, like you said, um, the language can be there's kind of a gap between where all the growth can happen, where you have some really deep conversations, um, and there's kind of academic, stale, distant, hard to reach or hard to access type of dialogue around mental health and just getting real with people. Like, some of the
Yeah,
questions are very approachable, they're palatable, they're so I think it's a very um, enabling type of tool for that.
that's cool. I mean, that's very much the intent. It's always good to hear that from others. Um, yeah,
Yeah. So what have been some of the experiences that you've seen when people have used your cards so far? Like, I'm curious what that development process looked like. I'm an engineer myself, but like I'm curious
yeah,
how you go from this idea to I want to test out some of these questions and I want to try them out. Like, what are some of the situations that you tested it out in?
yeah, yeah. Totally. I love that question, and you know, it's, I think, a space that I feel very well versed in, given my own background in design and user thinking, and I mean, ultimately usability studies. These are all kind of terminologies that exist in that world. But at the core of it is, how do you validate some idea? How do you take the stuff that isn't working out and amplify the thing that is working, and make that bigger, right? Or make that
Mm.
easier, less friction. Um, for me, the process was like, I actually, going way back, I I kind of outsourced. I hired a bunch of different game designers, right? I was like, how
Mm.
can I create as many ideas as possible, right? And I can only do so much, but like, let's get other people in, because they're going to have completely different ideas. So I used Upwork and like I
Mm.
hired a game designer from France. I hired a game designer from Taiwan. I hired a game, like, kind of all across the world,
Oh,
and
okay.
culturally, I think it's interesting because there's different cultural constraints, right? There's different things that people are coming into that. But I found it interesting how universally understood the concept was, right?
Mm.
The shared kind of existence of men, and a shared kind of like, yeah, this to me is true. I
Mm.
understand what you're trying to do, so like,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I haven't shared too much about. Sorry, I feel like I can go
Yeah,
into
go
the
for
weeds
it.
in
Go
every
for
little thing, and I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that I answer your question. But
You're
that
totally
was
good.
that was the start of it. So, you know, in the design, my goal in many ways was already kind of fixed. It was, how can I create some tool or game that was geared towards guys and left people feeling more connected,
Mm.
and taking some of what existed in the men's groups and bringing that more forward.
Yeah.
And so I kind of started with like, how do I want people to leave the game feeling, right?
Mm.
How do I want what do I want someone to say? Like, what do I want someone to say after playing this game? And you can
Hmm.
use that exercise as a really nice way to frame problems, right? Like, or solutions. Like, what, like, you could take, let's take Nike, for example, like building that brand or whatever that was. Like, what do I want people to feel leaving, interacting with this brand, right? I want them to feel
Mm.
inspired. I want them to say, I can do anything. These kind of like statements, and that all just bleeds into what you create. I get very passionate, and I need to remember
It's
to
great.
slow down and
I
breathe.
no need to throttle yourself, man. Well, it's something else I'm curious about is where do the questions come from? I'm sure you get that asked all the time.
Yeah. So I was going to get to the questions.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I knew questions. I think I knew questions had to be a part of this game. I felt like without questions, um, it just couldn't. It couldn't really stand up. Um, Knowing that questions were going to be a part of the game, I ordered every single conversation starter deck out there, and there's actually quite a few of them. I didn't know to the extent of how many there were.
Mm.
None of them are geared towards guys specifically, and honestly, I was a little bit like deflated. I don't know. I was a little maybe unimpressed by what was out there, and so I think for me that also was like, all right, there's an opportunity to create something better. Um, I created a Google sheet and I started just hammering ideas. I knew categorically certain areas that I wanted to highlight that I was bringing in from men's work and men's groups, right? Stuff like masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? Stuff like purpose. How do we live intentionally? What does a well-lived life look like? Stuff like emotions, right? Stuff like feelings. What am I actually feeling right now? How can I communicate that in a way that is accessible, right? Like um, support, right? Like how do we support one another? How do we say what we're grateful for in a relationship, right? Like there's not a lot of opportunities unless you're really unless you're historically doing that. I feel like it's one of the exercises in the men's groups that I really appreciated. It was this men's retreat. It was just it was like it was called a compliment popcorn, like something like that. So the idea was you have a group of guys, and for 1 minute, this is shout out to Dora No Fear. For 1 minute, everyone in the group. This is towards the end of the retreat. Everyone in the group would just share words or like one or two words that they appreciated about this person. And so you're sitting there and you're receiving all of this these things people appreciate about you, and like that can actually be a really scary thing. It's like so there's a card in the game. It's like, what do you appreciate most about me? I think it's framed that way, and that's like a level 3. So that's like a super fucking real, because like it's hard to ask that. Like it's a bit scary to ask friends or people in your life, what do you appreciate about me? But I want those like things to be exchanged. Like we only live so long, and like don't withhold that. like share the things that you appreciate about the people in your life.
Yeah, it's to even phrase it that way, that we're only here for so long and don't withhold that. It's powerful, because you're right. We drive to work, we make our coffee, we do the laundry, we see our partner, and then we go to bed or whatever. But all these things are floating around in our head that we kind of we think about this other person, but that kind of question, it triggers the discussion. So it can be very effective. And that actually kind of leads me to also wonder, how do you see the game being used? Because like in that situation, you ask somebody, but what are some examples of how you want people to use this?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's how I want people to use it and how I envisioned people to use it, and then how people are actually using it. In many ways, like I wanted something that was like flexible. Talking again from the design standpoint, I wanted something that allowed people to utilize it in a lot of different ways. The way that they felt good, or like the way that felt accessible to them. Just think about that. How do I want people to use it? a lot of like the stuff that I was navigating was like that question of like, are guys gonna want to play this? Like that's like a legitimate like, is this something that men feel comfortable enough to bring to the table and say like, hey guys, let's play this? And that is still a big question for me. Like,
Mm.
I mean, in many ways, it doesn't need to be anymore. I've seen enough validation from people reaching out and wanting the game, right? When someone buys something, they're saying, I believe in this thing. I want to use this thing.
Yeah.
But that was a big question for me was like, is this going to be mostly women in hetero, straight relationships buying this for their
Mm.
partner to
Mm.
try to open them up, right? Because that is also another use case that I was very aware of, right? Like I'd be an idiot not to see that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
who wants, the back of the box. It's a game for guys to explore all the shit we don't want to get to the shit we do, and like the shit we don't want to is like real talk, feelings, emotions, masculinity, and the shit we do, connection, support, mental and emotional health. Um, yeah, I don't actually know why I'm saying that. But I think like I wanted to be very blunt and straightforward about the like what we're talking about here, like
Yeah.
which is like uh, yeah, it's a very explicit kind of like attempt to connect, and
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that's that can be vulnerable, like that can be
Yeah.
scary. Um,
It
but
absolutely
I
is
feel
scary.
like at the same time, like we're reaching a point I think as men where it's like it's more okay to want that. It's more okay to uh, you know to like seek that out or like want to build deeper relationships. And so I think in many ways I was building this game for myself, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
was creating this game and I am still creating this game for myself because it's like the thing that I wanted to hear from the world, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense, and it echoes something you said before we started this, was that it's a very vulnerable thing for you to create this because you're
Yeah.
in many ways putting yourself out into the world in a way that's splayed wide open. So it sounds
Yeah.
like it's even hard for you to go through this experience of even being sold out of games, like you just got a new shipment in. I mean, at the same time that you're experiencing that, you're probably feeling pretty vulnerable yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know there's a bunch of questions in there. What do you have a favorite one?
A favorite question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that I really like. I mean, a lot of the marketing one, like the ones I use in the marketing, like so this is like the business card. This is my business card. So you can see it's got Let's Get Real by Weston. There's like my
That's
information on the back is one of my favorites. If you were dating yourself, what parts would really suck?
oh man, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
I just like the framing of that one.
Yeah.
Let's see. I mean, there's a yeah. So there's a common one I'll go to is like, what's a belief you had about the world that when you were younger that you were completely wrong about? I find that one to be really interesting. It's sometimes hard for people to retrieve answers, but when people do, it's kind of like these really deep, formative, um, kind of like belief systems changing, and you're like, oh yeah, like wow, like that makes a lot of sense. Like you could
Yeah.
go into that one particular thing and talk about that and how that shifted over time. Um, one of them that I mean, my wife didn't like this one, but one of them, there's some of them that are like kind of just trying to be humorous, right? There's like, I don't use this in the market material, but one of them is draw the most gnarly penis you can imagine, right? Like, and this somehow is often the card that I hear the most about from, right? Like, if my
Okay.
friends have the game, it's usually like I'm gonna get a picture of some, just gnarly drawn penis, and like
Oh my
that's
gosh.
that's like the information coming back my way, and then I'll
Okay.
be like, did you guys connect? Like, oh yeah, that was great. We laughed, all these things.
We connected over penises, of course.
Yeah, totally. This is a great, there's a lot of them. I'm not going to lie. I'm biased, but this is a great one. Do you spend more energy trying to fit in or stand out? How so? So like stuff like that, right? Like, maybe stuff that we know, but framed in kind of a different way. This is another, like, I feel like this is probably one you'd see in other games as well. So I'm not going to like brag about it in any way, but what's one thing you always wanted to do in life? What's stopping you? In one word or visual, describe how you feel in this exact moment. So there's like this kind of, everyone gets a little whiteboard as well. So you have a marker and something to write with. And so, you'll ask the group a question and then people have a bit of time to write something down. And that also was very much like kind of an intentional design decision to give people a little bit of time to sit with the content, like to think about it. And in some ways it's a little bit less threatening than someone just asking you a question on the spot, and hoping that some answer comes out. Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
The card I was speaking to just at the end there was, in one word or visual, describe how you feel in this exact moment, right? And that's kind of going again to like, how can we have prompts that like allow us to share what's happening in our internal world in a way that, it can be a little scary, but I think like visuals, using metaphors, there's a card in there that's like, describe your emotional state in the last week or so as a weather pattern or landscape. So these are like, use metaphors as a way to kind of like, you could say fog or like rain, and that's a little bit like less intimidating than to be like, I feel sad, like I feel really sad, and these are like just ways to kind of like ease into it.
That's a great thing, because I'm so proud of myself that I started using feeling words in my life in the last few years, but going to visual depictions and weather patterns would be a whole new level. How do you feel about doing one or two with me as just to kind of, we're about becoming seen and visible and being vulnerable. So I'll put myself out there if you've got one for me.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I don't know if I want to make it an easy or a hard one, but
there's some that are like specific to like the relationship as well. So like it's designed for like, not all, you can play with people you just met, but there's like context in the relationship, right? Like one is like, if we were to crank our relationship up a notch, what might that look like?
Okay.
Yes, the dial can go to 11, so like stuff like that.
I think at this point, like if I shook your hand, that would take it to the next level. Probably. I'd be like, totally, Wes, this is getting great. Serious now.
Yeah. I like this one. That's a level 3, but I don't think it's okay. I'll do this one as well. Actually, it's this one. So again, there's like a drawing element as well, but this one is level 2. It's pretty real, Jeff.
Okay, all right.
Draw the roller coaster of your week with annotations of highs and low moments, and then in parentheses it says flat roller coasters are cool too.
Oh boy! So you want me to draw a roller coaster of my week? Okay, all right. I've got it
with highs and lows.
Highs and lows. Oh God! I think people might get injured on this roller coaster, honestly. and I don't know. This is okay. Wow. Wait, what is today?
Today is Wednesday.
Okay, so I think right now I'm gonna go in reverse order. I'm gonna
kind of go backwards.
Yep. So right now we're kind of we're on a slope that is accelerating downward very rapidly, and people are it's like a white knuckle.
And are we going backward in time? So are you saying like so the last couple of days you've kind of been on a down slope?
Yes, yeah, and in fact I think people might lose their lunch shortly. Let's see. So going backwards, and then before that was a bit of a plateau, and then I'll hold up my picture at the end because you're just getting a description of me describe it as it dropped, and then Before that, it was actually pretty good. So, okay. Can you see that?
Yeah,
So
that's great.
okay, so this is Sunday over here, and I finished a bunch of house projects right around here. Things that had been like hanging out. I have a as a side note, this is really working well. Like I'm describing my week in a way that like I hadn't thought of before. So I had finished some house project. I had a wire hanging from my ceiling for the last 2 years, and then I wanted to get a light fixture just to because I hadn't like invested in myself. Painted my bedroom for the first time in 3 years.
Yeah, so you finished some project,
got new
feeling
bedding.
good
I was like
about
feeling
life.
good,
Yeah.
and then Monday came, and then it dipped.
Some Mondays.
And then it was like, oh, that's pretty bad. And then it was like, oh shit, okay. And then it got worse. So that not ready to talk about that stuff, but it was pretty shitty.
Yeah.
So yeah, that people are about to lose their hot dogs, I think. So yeah, it's awesome. That made me uncomfortable, but I also felt like it felt, if I were to describe it as a wind pattern, no, it felt like it gave me a language that was more rich and nuanced than just words. Because I'm limited by my vocabulary. If what are my feeling words? I can pull up my feelings wheel, which is great in and of itself. But this is something people can relate to in a way that is hard to describe, but it's easy to visualize. So that's a great question. Yeah,
it's cool. I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate this question because it's also like gives me perspective sometimes, right? Where it's like, I might be feeling a bit down that day, or maybe the entire week's been down, but usually there's some glimpses of like, okay, whatever, at this day and time or 3 days ago, there was like, I was feeling good, probably will come back. Like, I'll probably come back around.
Yeah, it's very wise to look at things that way. I give you a lot of credit. That's a good question. What about, you want to do another one?
Do you want one more?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do one more that's less visual, because I think like for the podcast it translates a little better.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, I'm gonna give you a level 3 super fucking real.
Oh God. Okay. Hopefully we'll have more technical problems right around the time you finish.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I can't hear you. Actually, go. You cut out.
Sorry. I'm gonna. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Jeff, when do you most commonly think I should? Where do you think this comes from? Family, culture, etc.
When and where do I think
when do you most when do you most commonly think I should?
I should. That makes me think of a couple things. Just going through my thought process, it makes me think of expectations and obligations. So, like, what do people expect me to do? I should probably do that. I should probably do that.
Yeah. Are there certain things that you often find that is expected of you in terms of something you're doing or not doing?
As a father, I do feel very responsible for being a good example and having boundaries and demonstrating. I want to make sure that I do right by my kids, and so I feel like I should hold high standards for them, and I should I should not go too easy on them. I don't want to be a pushover, but I want to make them feel safe too. As an employee, I feel like there's certain expectations. When do I feel like I should? I feel like I'm kind of skirting the issue with harder things. Sometimes I just want to not be responsible for things. I don't want to have so many responsibilities. I don't want to pay my mortgage. I want to, disappear and live in a tent in the woods or something like that. But I feel like I can't do
Yeah,
that
kind of
because I've got
back to the
responsibilities.
freedoms of like childhood.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think not having obligations and responsibilities is the lack of that is kind of having those things is what makes me feel like I should do certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with that. Not the fatherhood part, but definitely like responsibilities. I feel like in the house, it's like, oh, I gotta kind of make sure I'm doing my part. Like I should be cooking tonight, or
Yeah.
I should make sure the fridge is stocked, or like, just like kind of like that.
Yeah. There's like a
Like,
sense of obligation or responsibility to your people in your life.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's like other stuff, it's like I should be a good friend. I should, there's just like so many layers.
Mm-hmm.
If I just like sit with that one question, it's like it almost seems like it's endless in terms of like what is trying to, I don't know, like what's trying to kind of like, what are the threads or like the train tracks, like what are the threads of like gravitational pulls or something. So I almost think of like the ways like the river kind of like you can see from really high up, like rivers with a lot of different like branches going out. There's like so many different like threads of like, all right, go this way, go this way.
Yeah, it's like a well-worn path that we just go down. It makes me also think about what if we didn't have any of those things? So if I think there's
scary.
There's kind of like my
really
daughter's
scary.
getting ready to graduate high school and she's terrified because there's the future, like it's so ill-defined that even if you hate your teachers and homework and getting up early, you kind of know what to expect. If you don't have those things, if I don't have the shoulds and ought to, and then if you could literally do anything, the choices are overwhelming, and it's almost unsettling to be at the other end of the spectrum too.
Totally. There's no structure. Or there's these things can get philosophical. It's also probably because you're playing with me, so that also.
Oh, why that I'm thinking about those things, you mean?
Yeah, I was just saying like the game can kind of get philosophical, or like it can get kind of like I don't know. Yeah,
that's
and
true.
Then I was like, and then I correct myself. I was like, oh, it's because you're playing with me, like.
That's
just like where my mind often goes.
There probably is. I mean, I'm talking to the person who's coming up with the question, so people fascinate me, and so I'm like digging into a little what's behind it too, which is probably a defense mechanism I should look into. Well, I appreciate you coming on here today when talking to me, Wes. When we publish this, we'll have all the show notes and the links in the show notes. But can you tell us how we would find your card game?
Yeah, definitely. It's letsgetrealbro.com, the name of the game. You can go there. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, having conversations with guys, asking them questions from the game and having them share their own experience. And that's on Instagram, TikTok at LGR Bro.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. I appreciate it. I feel like this was a conversation that allowed me to connect with you and understand myself a little bit better than I would not have had you not held up that card and had you a roller coaster. So I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed this in ways I wasn't really expecting. So this is a great surprise. I appreciate it, Wes.
Yeah, same goes. I always appreciate I mean, in many ways, I've been talking mostly about myself, but I do feel, I feel like I've gotten to connect with you in this 45 minutes, and I just appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you being here. And you can find this discussion on YouTube and other major podcast platforms. Be sure to join our Discord server where we have daily discussions on men's mental health, where you can interact with live guests like Weston, and where we invite you to help men become seen. So, thanks again, Wes.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.